All right, Alec Tackmann here, finally making videos for this book. This is the third of the Go and Practice series, and I'm just going to go through page by page and do a brief lesson on each of them. The first section here is based on the pattern of going right, left, left foot. And there's a few pages in this book beginning based on this idea. The first probably 3 pages are exactly that pattern, and then there's some kind of offshoots that are similar. Before playing this one, you probably want to make sure you're pretty solid on your basic double strokes as well as your inverted double strokes. And if you don't know what an inverted double stroke is, that is when you play a single first and then you follow it with doubles from there. So the pattern is this is actually outlined in the second book if you're interested in that one. This one is just kind of a rudiment refresh. But having those in shape is really going to be the key to getting this fast, because you need a good double stroke in the left hand. So again, the basic pattern here is just going to go, if we look at just number 1 on page 8, the first stroke is going to be on the floor tom, the doubles on the snare, and then the bass drum is the ending. Now when you play it slowly, this one's not going to sound like much or even feel like that useful of a fill. Where this one really shines is when you kind of amp up the speed a little bit, and then you get a pretty showy, flashy go-to fill, especially if the left hand has got a good double stroke to it. If you have that technique there, this is actually a nice kind of like stop and think drum fill to have, where if you're stuck on an idea, you can kind of sit on this on a loop for a little while before you want to branch off into something else. Also, because it ends on a bass drum, you get that millisecond to move wherever else you want to go when you're connecting it to something else. So yeah, the first one is just the basic idea, and you want to sit with this one for a good while before you try to venture onward. The key here, I think, is in this left-hand double stroke to keep your stroke happening in the very center of the drum, and maybe even a little bit tighter snare wire underneath, because you want that articulation. So we have 3 different voices: the tom, the snare, and the bass drum, and they're all fairly different sounding drums. We want them to match the timbre as much as possible and have the articulation match as much as we can. So we're going to hit in the center of the snare, the center of the floor tom, because the bass drum is going to be such a short sound. If we venture away from that, you kind of lose the 16th note feel. So you can check this out. If I play it on the edges, and then I'll move it inward. So you notice when I'm on the edges, the bass drum is too present. So the lead hand, the right hand, is the key to this one. To get the fast speed going now, when you get used to the double stroke, the next part of this is getting used to making this cycle between here, here, and here happen quickly. One good way to start that is just to practice the classic rock, triplet fill, right, left, bass. I didn't even put that one in this book because it's such a cliche fill, but sit and get the hang of that one. It's basically a modification of that. We're going to take the left hand and make it a double stroke, and it's basically the same idea. Now, playing this one up to speed, I think a good way to practice this is just focus on your right hand as basically being your quarter note. That's your guide, that's your anchor, that's what your mind is on. There's too many strokes going on here to think of them all, especially if you're playing them like at a 30-second note pace. So your right hand is kind of your anchor. The rest is just going to fall in line. So you want to have this kind of going as your core. The other part of it is matching up this bass drum. Where does that one land? So this, as simple as an exercise this is, this can be even tricky for some people. It's just thinking of the bass drum as almost like a flam before the floor tom. Get the hang of that, then we drop in the doubles. Now, when you get out of this fill, this is the tricky part. Because the final note in the sequence is the bass drum, if you want to crash with the bass drum, you have to do a quick double stroke on the kick drum, and that's a whole other thing that will, it takes some time to develop that, but just push it. There's not a lot of secrets to a quick double stroke on a kick drum. You just got to spend a lot of hours trying to get that out as fast as you can. So at the end of the cycle, you're going to have. Otherwise, you can end with a crash with the snare. That's cool too. But if you want to have like a strong ending on it, you gotta get that double stroke on the kick drum. After that, just play around with moving the right hand around. Any number of toms you got. You can come up with whatever melody you want. Snares off sounds cool too. But yeah, that's the gist of it. So that's the start. This one actually works pretty well in the jazz context too, even against triplets. Because the bass drum having that feeling of being on kind of the upbeat, it kind of has a little bit of swing to it. So that's what's also kind of cool. This kit isn't really tuned for jazz, but that works as well too. A fun modification of this one, if you're in jazz mode, is instead of the bass drum, we're going to play the hi-hat foot on that of the beat, the final of the 4 strokes, and we're going to put our right hand on the ride cymbal. And then now we're going to have this sound. Now this one's totally jazzy. We really got to make sure now our left hand is quiet and articulate. So right in the center of the drum, and very soft double strokes, because we can't let the snare drum overpower with the ride cymbals playing, and certainly the hi-hat. Now, when we're playing this, again, of course, our right hand is playing quarter notes, so this can fall in line with your jazz patterns. So say you're doing some comping, or you want a kind of free-form sounding solo moment or whatever, this is kind of a cool idea to end on as well. So yeah. That's a general idea, and like with anything you learn on the kit, play around with it, try hitting different things, move your hands to different, sources, different sound sources, see what you can come up with. That's the general idea. Lastly, on the bottom of this page, this one's kind of a fun one I like to do. If I can find my brushes. Play it all on the snare, and then you got just the left foot on the hi-hat again. You can do the bass drum too. But this is a cool little soloing device. It kind of reminds me of kind of like a Steve Gadd sort of thing. But anyway, you got this So yeah, there you go. A little bit thicker hi-hats would work better for that than what I'm using right now. That's the idea. That's page number 8. So check it out.